wherever you are wherever you are in the world. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to learn with you today. I think that what we're going to talk about is going to relate to everyone, every shiur other than Rip Sperling's. I don't think I'm going to talk much about matzah or about measurements. But in a sense, we opened up with Rabbanit Ne'ima talking about the sha'alu ishmeet re'ehu, the word to borrow or to request, or again, the fantastic shir that she gave. We're going to talk about the word she'ela, but a very different context of the word she'ela, which Karen Hockhauser also was addressing the Arba Banim. We're going to take a dip back into that discussion, but I think from a very different perspective. So I'm going to begin with a question, which is, what is the purpose of she'elot, of questions at the Seder? Questions seem to be very built into the whole story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. There's this assumption that the next generation is not going to get it. They're not going to understand things, and they're going to be questioning when they are meeting the rituals of Pesach, and they're going to ask, what is it all about? But what we want to explore together is, why is it that the redemption, that the Geula, seems to have been built contingent upon questioning? I will share my screen. And those of you who have it printed, perhaps you can follow along there as well. So what we see here is the first few sources. I brought the sources that we recognize because they make their way into the different of the four sons, right? First, in the 12th parak of Shmot, we read, "V'haya ki yomru alechem b'nechem ma ha'avodah hazot lachem." Right? What is this work to you? We learn to recognize that as the voice of the Rasha. Then we read about in Parak Yud Gimel, a parak later. We will get back to the context, but we'll skip for now to Pasuk Chet, which I bolded. We'll get back to this section at the end of the shir. But in Pasuk Chet, we read, "V'higata levincha bayom ahu le'mor ba'avor zeh asa Hashem li b'tzeiti mimitzrayim," and we recognize that as part of the communication that we'll have with the she'eno yodea lish'ol. We then have a few psukim later in Pasuk Yud Daled, "V'haya ki yish'alcha bincha machar le'mor mazot v'amarte elav b'chozek yad hosianu Hashem mimitzrayim b'meit avadim." Right, mazot, that's more of our tam. And then Devarim Perak Vav in Parashat Bet Chanan, "Ki yish'alcha bincha machar le'mor ma ha'edot v'hachukim v'mishpatim asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu etchem," which Karen discussed Rav Rimon's opinion on that at length, and go back and listen to that if you didn't have a chance. And just to drive this home, we see in Shmot, in Parak Yud Gimel, that Rashi pulls them all together in a bit of a non-PC way, right? He says, "Mazot ze tinok tipesh she'eno yodeh lahamik she'elato v'sotem v'shoel mazot." This is a not bright child or young child, right? Who doesn't know how to give depth to his question, and therefore he just asks a general, "What's this?" And elsewhere, right? That's what we just read in Parak Vav of Devarim, the more wise question, which goes into more of the details. Harezot shelat ben chacham, dibra Torah keneged arba'a banim, rasha v'sheno yodeh lishol, v'hashoel derech stuma, v'hashoel derech chachama. Okay, so and so Rashi is really summarizing for us in this pasuk in Shmot the four different sons, which again we've recognized. Now, what's very interesting is when we look back, right, and just to be very clear, meaning we know that the Torah, we know that the Haggadah loves series of fours, right? The Haggadah loves four, but we just read these psukim in Shmot Perek Yud Bet, Shmot Perek Yud Gimel, Dvarim Perek Vav, and we had a total of three questions, with one of them relating to what was discussed in the previous year, that, with one of them being, what was I going to mention? Um, uh, yeah, meaning that in Yud Bet it's ki yomru alechem b'nechem, as opposed to the other ones where it's yishalcha and yishalcha. But it's clear we have three, so it's almost obvious that we have someone here that Parak Yud Gimel Pasuk Chet is the one who doesn't initiate, right? And that's where we get to this number of four. But the Mishnah in Masechet Psachim does something very interesting. Right before we get to the Manishtana, the Mishnah says, "Mazgulo kos sheni, v'kan haben shoel aviv." Okay, and take a look at source number 7. You see Rashi on this line. Kan b'mezigat kos sheni haben shoel et aviv, manishtana achshav shemozgin kos sheni kodem achila. Now, what did you expect Rashi to say? What is it that the Ben is going to ask? The Ben is going to ask the Manishtana, which is the next thing in the Mishnah, right? Take a look at the Mishnah. Mishnah goes on. V'im ein dat beven aviv melamdo. Manishtana halayla hazeh mikol halaylot. Sheb'chol haylot anu achlin chametzu matzah halayla hazeh kulo matzah. And onwards and onwards. We won't go into the details of how this Mishnah is different than how we read it in the Haggadah. But notice Rashi. What does Rashi say? Oh, what is the son asking about? The son is asking about the pouring of the second cup. Why are we pouring a second cup before we eat? Why are things different than they normally are? Now, that's going to be part of the Manishtana, but Rashi is basically saying that maybe actually the questioning, right? The questioning isn't supposed to be just this rote Manishtana, the four questions that we ask. No, even the pouring of the second cup itself is supposed to be leading toward this idea of questioning, right? This idea of questioning is so baked into the very nature of the evening. And Rashbam says similar. It was slightly different than Rashi. We know that Rashbam's parish on Masachet Psachim is almost, dare I say, more important than his grandfather's parish. It is more in depth than Rashi's, right? V'kan haben shoel et aviv, kan b'mezigat kos sheni haben shoel et aviv, im hu chacham ma nishtana achshav shemozgin kos sheni kodem achila, v'Rabbeinu kibel mi Rabbo, Rabbeinu Yaakov ben Yakar, v'chein haben shoel kmo kein benot slavchad, klomar din hu sheyehe shoel b'mezigat kos sheni ma nishtana. In other words, again, these two ideas really backing up Rashi. We're supposed to be asking not the four questions, but we're supposed to be noticing things. The kids need to be noticing and be curious about the changes that are going on in this night. And this is so strong that if you look in the Rambam in Hilchot Chametz Umatzah, he's describing the way that the Seder moves along. And take a look at where I bolded in source 9. Umozgin hakos hasheni, v'kan haben shoel, v'omer hakorei, ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halilot. In other words, it's not even clear that, right, and it seems like Rambam is quite similar to Rashi and Rashbam. It's not even clear that it's the kid who's supposed to get up and ask the four questions. The kid is just supposed to be in this mode of asking, right? And it's the second cup that's supposed to be starting off this idea of asking. We are supposed to be in question mode at the Seder, and it could be that the person who reads the whole Haggadah, different families do it differently. Does one person read the whole Haggadah? Does it get passed around? In our family, we pass it around, and a different person reads different sections, right? The Omer HaKorei Manishtana Halayla Zemikol Halilot, right? Everybody has to be in question mode, and it's not clear that it's the child who's asking the four questions, because everybody has to be in question mode. And this, you can see, is strengthened in the way that the Torah writes it, in the way the Shulchan Aruch brings it down. The Torah says, "Mozgin miyad kos sheni kadei sheishal hatinok lama shotin kos sheni kodem haseuda." Okay, so again, and then comes along the Manishtana as a separate source of curiosity and questioning, again codified in the Shulchan Aruch. Mozgin lo miyad kos sheni kedei sheishalu hatinokot lama shotim kos sheni kodem haseuda. Okay, now we then make our way and see our babanim, our four children, which we've already met, and when we just looked through them, when we looked into the Chumash, we're not going to talk about. Wait a minute, there's a mismatch between the answers given to the Chacham and the Rasha, and from what's written in the Torah. That is a different shiur. But we see here that we meet four different kinds of questioners: our Chacham, our Rasha, our Tam. Truth is, we meet three types of questioners, and then we get our She'eno Yodea Lish'ol, the one who doesn't know how to ask. Rabbanit Karen used the word curiosity, right? He doesn't have curiosity, it seems. And we know that it says, At p'tach lo, we have to open things up for them. This is, again, the first in Perek Yud Gimel. Shneimar v'higaret lebincha b'yom hahu lemor ba'avor zeh Hashem li b'tzeiti mitzrayim. And then, everyone, I have a question, okay? The next thing in the Haggadah seems completely non sequitur. The Haggadah goes on and says, Yachol merosh chodesh, Talmud lomar b'yom hahu, b'yom hahu yachol mibod yom, Talmud lomar ba'avor zeh lo amarti ela b'shah sheyesh matzah u'maror munachim lefanecha. All due respect to this interesting, learning out from the different words, which is the kind of thing we're used to in Talmudic dialogue. But here we are, we're trying to engage the person who doesn't even know how to open their mouth, the person who does not know how to ask. And we start going into this thing about, like, I might have thought that I can fulfill it from Rosh Chodesh. Oh yeah, that's why it says Bayom Hahu. Well, what maybe during day, that's why it says V'avor zeh. That's to tell us that you need to have your matzah and your maror in front of you. All due respect, but how is this helping us with this child who's so lacking curiosity that they can't even ask a question, right? Is this related to our She'eno Yodea Lish'ol, or is it connected to the next thing going on in the Haggadah? So, in order to answer this question, we're going to take a little bit of, shall we say, a detour, a little spazier into some beautiful ideas that I learned from my father, Rabbi Meir Sandor, which are a little bit Kabbalistic. So bear with me. I will say, if we wanted to go into the depths of it, we'd probably be here for 4 hours. We would have brought a full Zohar that I decided, nope, it'll take us 4 hours to explain it. We're not going to bring it. I'm going to try to not get us too bogged down into the different Sifirot, because I think, again, we'll be here for 4 hours, and I'm mindful of everybody's time. But let's see how we can do this. So we all know that the very first verse in the Torah is Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, right? It's a fact. God created heaven and earth, right? In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. The Kabbalistic tradition has a bit of an obsession with a pasuk in Yeshayahu, which is source number 13, which you can see here. And it's from a very, very powerful Perek of Tehillim, of Yeshayahu, Perek Mem. And it says, Si'um marom enechem, right? Lift up your eyes, ure'u mi bara elah. Okay, lift up your eyes and see who created these. Now, if I were to ask you, you're looking up into heavens, right? Yeshayahu is telling you, cast your eyes heavenwards, and see who created these. You would think, oh, it must be talking about these celestial beings. If I'm looking up in the daytime, I'm looking at clouds, I'm looking at the sun. If I'm looking at night, I'm probably looking at, the moon and the stars, right? The pasuk continues, Hamotzi mispar tziva'am, right? The one who created them, the one who sends out their hosts by count, L'chulam b'shem yikra. This God, right, seems to have a name for each one. Merov onim va'amitz koach ish lo ne'edar. He's got so much great might and so much power, but nobody fails to appear. In other words, everybody is counted. Okay, so this verse in Yeshayahu really captures the imagination of the Kabbalistic tradition. And they see it as a bit of is not as a bit, they see it as directly relating to Bereshit bara Elokim. And the um, the Zohar explicates this verse, and it has this really interesting dialogue between Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Elazar brings an idea, and then Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai takes it to the next level, and it's really, again, a worthy study in and of itself. But the Zohar basically uses this pasuk, and he says, "Me," right? Who is me? Me bara Elah. Again, we have in Kabbalah, we have 10 sifirot, and the three upper sifirot are seen as like connected to each other and kind of in a whole different universe. And then there's the lower 7 sfirot. And so there's this idea in the Zohar that you're supposed to ask, Mi bara Elah, who created this world? And that is despite the fact that there's going to be so much about this world that is so inaccessible to most of us, right? There's so much mystery, and there's only so much that we're going to be able to understand. And there's only so much we're going to be able to get into like the upper realms of things. But that doesn't mean that we're not supposed to ask. We're supposed to. The very structure of the universe is such that God is looking for a very personal relationship, right? He calls each of us by our name. He wants that relationship with every single being, despite the fact that there might be questions that are not necessarily going to get answers that we mere humans are fully going to understand. And the Zohar goes on and talks about the difference between questions of me, which are really reaching up into like the very upper realms of reality, as we know it or as we don't know it, as it may be, and questions of ma, questions of what, which are a little bit more accessible and relate more to the Elah, to the world that we know, the world as it does appear to us. And so what we should be doing, despite the fact that even our ma questions, even our questions of what is this, which might relate a little bit more to like the physical reality that we actually have access to, even those questions may not necessarily get answers. They're all rooted in the fact that we really are supposed to be asking the questions of me bara Elah, who created this entire world, who is really behind all of this. And we're supposed to be asking these massive, massive questions, even though we may not be privy to the detailed answers at all times. So this, as my father very beautifully explains, right? Even the questions that we don't get answers to, they put us in this position to open up our heart and mind, meaning being able to be in the position of questioning, of having that level of curiosity. It's a whole different position through which to view this world. And it's all rooted in the very reality of the world itself, right? Where, again, as framed by Yeshayahu, we're supposed to be asking this question of Mi bara Elah. Who is there? Who's behind all this? Right? That this is the fundamental position that we're supposed to be in toward the universe. Okay, so now we're ready to sink our teeth into a very interesting text. And by the way, please feel free to write in the chat. That's how I'll see if you have any questions, which, my goodness, the nature of this class, we all have to be asking questions, right? But let's get started with the idea, a very, very powerful idea, which is going to incorporate this concept that we just discussed in the Zohar from Rav Gershon Chanoch Leiner in his Sod Yesharim. Rav Gershon Chanoch Leiner was the grandson of the Mei HaShiloach, the Ishbitzer, right? His father was the Beit Yaakov, Rav Yaakov, right? So he's the grandson of Rav Mordechai Yosef Leiner. And he is known as the Radziner Rebbe. Okay, so he says, "V'haya ki shalcha bincha machar lemor mazot v'amarta elav b'chozek yado tziyanu Hashem mimitzrayim," quoting the pasuk in Bo. "Ha'inyan shehitziv Hashem yitbarach zot hamitzvah sheyihiyeh be'orach she'elah." HaKadosh Baruch Hu set this all up to be in a spirit of question. K'dichtiv v'haya ki shalcha bincha machar. Ki'ita bazohar hakadosh, she's quoting a Zohar from Parshat Balak. Sheyesh ma de lo kaima l'sheila klal, v'yesh ma de kaima l'sheila, lo le'atva, v'it l'sheila, v'u le'atva. There are three different kinds of questions. The truth is there are things that really we can't even question. We can't possibly begin to understand the answer. We have also, right, it's not things that, as I translate into English here, things that are not subject to questioning at all. There are things which are subject to questioning, but we're just really not going to get answers. And there are those for which we have questions and we can also get answers. And v'hinei zot hakadusha sheYisrael ala b'machshava hagam shenitbarara kvar gabe ha'avot hakadoshim b'tachlit hashlemut. Okay, the Avot, they got this. The Avot, right, as they're being described as those who really could fully comprehend that there were different kinds of questions, and they accepted it with full hearts. Achein hu ritzono yitbarach sheyitpashet nami zot hakadusha gam lemerachok af al kol ha'peulot. Okay, but Hashem didn't want it to just be that, there were three people in the world who had this, understanding of how the universe worked. He wanted the whole world to be able to experience that. And that was only going to be possible if we went through a period of hiddenness, which is what our time in Mitzrayim. It's going to even bring it the level of depths of Tuma to which this we had to descend in order to bring up this idea in a higher kind of way. Okay, so there's this idea that we're going to have to go into like the depths of the constraints in order to bring this idea out on a much higher level. The Sod Yesharim continues. V'hinei b'sha'at ha'helem leit l'sheila klal. And when we were in that complete lack of obscurity, hiddenness, right? I even put the word right there, right? There was no questioning whatsoever. Okay, what's he referencing here? He's referencing a Mishnah in Masechet Chagiga. The Mishnah in Masechet Chagiga very explicitly tells us that whoever looks at four matters, right? What's above, what's below, what's panim, what's lechor, it's better as if they never entered the world, right? You shouldn't be asking what was before, what was after, what's above, what's below. You might read that Mishnah in Chagiga and think, we're not supposed to be questioners. We're not supposed to ask questions. We're supposed to leave things as they are. The Sod Yesharim is saying something very powerful. He's saying that that is actually a worldview that is when we are in a state of hiddenness. When you're in a state of hiddenness and you have no ability to penetrate through questions. Says the Sod Yesharim, Ulam be'et shematchil Hashem yitvarach lahanhir et ha'or b'hatfisa k'mevuar b'zohar HaKadosh be'asor lachodesh hazeh v'yikchu lahem ish sela bayit v'chulei. Okay, what does he say? But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he starts pouring light into this world, and when did he start doing that? On the 10th of the month of Nisan. And everybody was supposed to take the Seh, right? And everyone was supposed to start getting ready for Korban Pesach. There was something going on the 10th of the month. Why the 10th? Amai be'asor, Amar Rabbi Elazar, bezimna de'inhir yovla lesihara. This is when the Yovel is starting to illuminate the moon. What does this mean? What's the Yovel? Well, we all know that the day of Yovel, right, the day on which after every 50 years we blow the shofar, that's also on the 10th of the month. So there's something breaking forward, breaking out on the 10th of the month, similar in the month of Nisan and in the month of Tishrei. Azai ro'eh adam hishtanut. Now light is starting to flood things. And people are starting to pick up on differences, on change. Wow, so now man is saying something new is going on here. It seems to him like something's new is going on here. This is the newness of the moon. And he quotes a different Zohar. He says something fascinating here, right? He says, really, we're in a constant state of renewal, according to God. From God's perspective, things are being renewed at every single moment. We humans, we have these moments where suddenly we see something new. Right? That's actually a very human perspective. We notice things are old and boring and conventional and lacking luster, but Hashem, he's always in a state of hitchadshut. Right? Mitzad Hashem yitbarach ein shayach lomar chadshut, kivan she'eno yashen. He doesn't get old. Like there's no concept of God getting old. He's a little above beyond time here, right? Mitzido shum davar v'tamid hu hitchadshut. So he is in a constant state of renewal. But we human beings, we stop noticing that something is awesome. We start getting a little bored by the reality as we know it. And so he goes on and he says, "Va'az yesh l'she'ela mahu zot ha'hishtanut." What's going on here? What's different? Remember, he pointed out at the beginning, the Avot, they got this. They didn't need to be taught this grand message. But the rest of us, mere mortals, we needed to go through a period where there was complete ha'elem, where there was no concept of asking questions, where nobody could even imagine asking any questions. And then the light needed to start flooding in. V'tshigan here b'toch hatfisa shel Yisrael. Umitfa'at zot ha'hitchadshut hu ha'she'ela ma nishtana. What is different? Remember, we had me representing the higher realms. We have ma, even the ability to say what's going on here. Even that is expressed now through these words, ma nishtana. Klomar shenikar mefurash bazo halayla hishtanut Bahabriya, the kol nefesh Yisrael yachol lahargish b'chadashut. Machmat chadetohi desihara shenitchadesh b'zo halayla. We know what happens in the middle of the month when the moon is at its hitchadshut, right? Is at the full moon, right? And so everybody starts noticing something is different. Ki haTorah lo mayri me'adam kazeh she'olech b'lo dat. We're not talking about somebody who has no sensitivity to newness, no spiritual awareness. There are some people out there who notice the differences all the time, right? There are people who are really spiritually sensitive and they notice, wow, the world is different. Today is totally different. My grandfather, Alav HaShalom, he was a remarkable person, and until he was 94 years old, every single day he noticed something new. I remember I was once walking in Los Angeles with him. We were looking out, and all of a sudden he goes, I think he was 93 years old. He goes, "Wow, I never noticed I could see the Hollywood sign from here." And I was like, "Wow." That's somebody who who pays attention, right? Who looks every single day to see that things are different. But we're not all able to do that. Sometimes it just seems like what was yesterday is today, right? The exact same thing. I'm seeing the same thing yesterday as I saw today. And comes along the Rav Gershon Hanoch Leiner, and he's saying to us, well, yeah, but we also know that there are times where light starts flooding, where we start feeling like, manishtana, things are different. Things are not the way that they were. And he goes on and he talks about how it's particularly at this time where you're noticing the hitchadshut, where it's all the more important to empty out your ego. And that's the whole idea of not eating chametz at this time. Why do we not want to eat chametz at this time? Because chametz represents ego and it being about me, right? And at a moment where you're noticing newness and difference, right? We are at spiritual risk here of attributing the change and all of the newness and all of the goodness to humans. And in order to make sure that at this moment of massive spiritual awakening that's happening in the world, you're actually going to end up attributing it back to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So that's why we don't have chametz during the time of Pesach, as we're really watching all this newness come into the world. We need to make sure that we're attributing all that newness to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and that's what he expresses here in these two paragraphs. Okay, and he talks and he quotes the Zohar as talking about the purpose of matzah is that it right, you can have matzah the rest of the year because you won't forget things once you've had that week of noticing, whoa, grand change happening in this world. You can do that once you've had your week without matzah. And that chametz, not eating chametz and eating matzah, is the antidote during this time, right? He talks about it as a healing remedy that enables one to enter and know the secret of faith of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? That matzah is that remedy to make sure that we have proper humility. Okay. Okay. He goes on and he says, right? So Hashem sets up the ability for us to have this awareness, be'olam shana nefesh, right? Both in time, olam, like the world representing the physical space, shana representing time, nefesh representing our consciousness. And he goes on and he says, in the spirit, in physical space, ba'olam yesh makom beit habechira, there is the place of the Makom HaMikdash. Shebo nikar mefurash kedichtiv ki beiti beit tefila yikareh l'chol ha'amim. Ve'ikar haratzon yitbarachu bezot ha'hakara sheyesh la'adam behahishtanut hachadashut ki machmat zeh yesh la'adam makom lisha'el. He wants us having a physical place in this world to be open to question, to be open to the idea of asking what and asking who is behind all of this. This is it. This is what it's all about, being in a posture of being curious about what is out there and who is out there and who is it who has brought this all into being. Right? This is the ability to ask a question. The enlightenment of a question is without limit. K'di'ita b'zohar kadosh kevan desha'al barnash umepashpesh li'istakla ulaminda midarga ledarga ad sof kol dargin kevan demati taman ma. This is wild, right? Here you are, and somebody's asking and seeking and wondering and going higher and higher and higher in their questioning. And what happens at the end? They kind of come back to the ma. In other words, they're even going for the me. Who is this? Who's behind all this? Who's behind this whole universe? And your job is to keep seeking. Your job is to go to the highest heights of seeking. But it could be that you're kind of going to like go back down to the ma, because the more you seek, the more you know you do not know. Ma yadata ma istakalta ma pishpashta husatin kikadmita. You might end up, right? You might end up coming kind of back and crashing down and being like, actually, I know nothing. Right? The more you ask and the more you question, the more you reason, you know nothing. Hainu, ki mi shema'amik biyoter bezot ha'she'ela hanikra mi dekaima l'she'ela makir nami biyoter ma yadata, ma istakalta. The level of epistemological humility that you need to be able to have to know, like, wow, my job is to be in a position, in a posture of questioning. I'm going to keep questioning higher and higher, and chances are, the more I question, the more humility I'll have in knowing that I know nothing. There's no end to this question. Whoa, what's different? Because really, again, as he's explaining to us, there's newness at every moment. Everything's changing. Everything's changing. Okay, now, here he gets back to this idea of derech she'ela. מה נשתנה הלילה הזה? העניין שהציב השם יתברך הופעת הערת הישוע של פסח שילך על דרך שאלה, כמו דכתיב, והיה כשישאלך בנך מחר לאמור מה זאת, ולא עוד אלא שחכמינו זיכרונם לברכה התקינו לפעל השתנות בזה הלילה יותר מבכל הלילות. למען שיתמהו הרואים ויתעורר בליבם קושיה מה נשתנה הלילה וכולי. He says the entire salvation of Pesach needs to be from this curiosity of questioning. This is what it is all about. And this idea of, and not only that, but we supercharge it by making things different, by inserting all kinds of things that are different in order to bring curiosity to all of the people sitting at the table. Of course, it's quoting the idea of giving out klayot and egozim, Latino code, give out all kinds of treats to the children. Kedei shelo yishnu, we don't want them falling asleep. V'yisha'alu, we want them asking. Chotvin matzot, we play games with the matzah, we steal it. We want them curious, we want them engaged. And he goes on to explain that this is because the necessity of being able to go deeper and deeper in an understanding of the reality of the universe, even though you're going to at some point realize I know nothing, that is actually at the core of being redeemed. Like this is the essential idea behind actually getting to a point of redemption. And he goes on and he quotes this Zohar that I started out with at the beginning, this idea of me bara ele, and that the more we go into the me, the more we also then realize we're even lacking the ma. We're even lacking the understanding of the ma, and this shouldn't drive us to despair. All the opposite. It should leave us energized and curious and wondering on the highest level. Now, I was reading a book over the weekend, which I actually thought reflected this in a very, very strange way. Bear with me. There's Peter Thiel, who is quite a successful businessman. He founded things like PayPal and Palantir and things like that. So he has this book called From Zero to One, and it's Notes on Startups or How to Build the Future. And he brings up a crazy story. Ted Kaczynski, bet you haven't heard his name in a while, the Unabomber, remember him? So apparently, right back in the 1990s, he went and terrorized a gazillion people and sent all kinds of pipe bombs. What was his reason? Why was he doing that? He thought that modern people are depressed because the world's hardest problems have already been solved. What's left to do is either easy or impossible, and pursuing those tasks is deeply unsatisfying. So he says, what you can do, even a child can do. What you can't do, even Einstein couldn't do. So his idea was to destroy all existing institutions and technology so that we could start again because there's nothing left to do, which is like, clearly he was not well, like really, really not well. But it's almost like it's obviously a horrible cautionary tale of somebody who can't see any curiosity and thinks everything out there has been solved. And as complex as it is to understand this Zohar, right? The very creative way and poetic way in which it coaxes us to say that the entire world is animated by the curiosity of mi bara ela, who made this and what, and being able to ask these fundamental questions, right? An entire redemptive posture is one that sees that we've only gotten started, right? That no matter how much modern man has mastered this world, we really only gotten started. There's so much more to uncover. There's so much more to ask and so much more to explore. And it's not at all, it's almost like, well, obviously when we're talking about redemption from Egypt, right? Getting out from a place where you could not ask questions, right? Where you were under a tyrannical regime and there was no concept of asking a question and being curious, right? The curiosity was completely snuffed out of them. That of course this is what being at the night of all nights, right? The most that's what the Seder is truly all about. We believe we've only gotten started. There's so much we've discovered, but I mean, have we cured cancer? Have we figured out how to have world peace? Certainly not. We're watching people who are suffering behind regimes where they're not allowed to ask questions, right? Last week I saw this very ridiculous scene from Knesset where our Knesset members, even in the midst of a war, are like, laughing at each other, and I think they could use with a little bit more derech eretz. I'm not saying that that their behavior has proper midot all the time, but that they were like, but they're allowed to ask questions. They're allowed. What democracy is all about, right? That they're allowed to ask questions and express dissent and opposition. That's a core of redemption. And that's how the Torah already sets it out. It's all about asking the questions. Ma zot, ma zot, ma avodah zot lachem. Now, ma avodah zot lachem, right? The Haggadah is telling us there's limits, right? There are limits to our questioning and in the way that we express our questions. Karen talked about it very beautifully before. That there are people who are not, they're not curious. They're filled with contempt, right? There are limits to the level of questions that we're allowed to ask. But if your questions are coming from this like deep desire to get to like the core of, right, to the being that put this world into creation, that's redemption, right? That's really where the roots of redemption are. Okay, now. I thought it was actually very interesting to see. I'm going to share my screen again. That this actually, I think, explains a very thing. It's the question that I asked before. You might recall that I asked the question, how does this idea of Yachol Me Rosh Chodesh help it in any way, right? This was back on page, where did we see this? We saw this here on page 3, that right following the She'eno Yodea Lishol, we have this passage that at first glance seems to be completely unrelated to the She'eno Yodea Lishol, where we're trying to, establish when is it that we're supposed to be telling over the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. But actually, based on what Rav Leiner, when I read through this idea from the Sod Yesharim, I was like, oh, this is, amazing. Because right, the Sod Yesharim was talking about the light that kept flooding in, right? But that it took until the 10th, until the light started flooding, right? And the change started being noticeable. And so if we're going to take the Sod Yesharim to its next level, I think it explains why Yachol Rosh Chodesh is here. Because, right, what is it saying? Listen, once in a while, you might not notice that things are different one day to the next, right? And Rosh Chodesh Nisan, things started happening, but it perhaps wasn't perceptible. You couldn't perceive it enough yet, right? It's not enough to start on Rosh Chodesh. You've got to make sure, right? We're going to point things out, especially for the one who has lost their curiosity or hasn't figured out how to be curious yet. We're going to put on a major show for them. We're going to wait until the hitchadshut, until the newness as perceived from the human perspective is in its shining glory. And that is the night of Yetziat Mitzrayim. The night of Yetziat Mitzrayim, we're going to pull out all the stops and we're going to put on the biggest show and we're going to make sure the matzah is there, the maror is there, right? That we're showing all the differences. And that is actually part of what's necessary in order to kind of shock some curiosity into the one who either never built up the ability to be curious, or for some reason or another, the curiosity has kind of been drained from them, which I think happens to all of us, right? That was, what Rabbanit Karen said before, that we can recognize different elements of the Arba Banim in all of us. And I think, I think we all go through phases where we're feeling really interested and curious, and where we're feeling really rebellious, and we're feeling really snide, and we're feeling really contemptuous. And And sometimes we're feeling like I've lost my luster. I haven't seen like what. Give me something that's going to make things seem fascinating and going to stoke the curiosity. And that's what the Leil HaSeder is supposed to be about. And I think this is also you can see this reflected in the Rambam. Um, because the Rambam puts it all in one paragraph in the Rambam's Haggadah. V'she'eno yodea lishol at p'tach lo shne'amar v'yigaretz lebincha b'yom ha'u lemor ba'avor zeh asa Hashem li b'tzeitzi mitzrayim v'yigaretz lebincha yachol mirosh chodesh talmud lomar b'yom ha'u. In other words, it's all one. Yes, this is part of stoking the curiosity of the one who has lost curiosity. Now, the truth of the matter is, who is more likely to lose curiosity in this world? Is it the children? All due respect, I think it's us adults, right? And I think that that might also explain why it is. Why do we have the Ben Shoel? It's not only because we need to pass this down to the next generation. I think it's even deeper than that. It's that we need to borrow from the innate curiosity of the children and have their innate curiosity wake us up, right? Who's the Eino Yodea Lishol? It's probably not the children. The children are curious. It's the parents. I remember years ago reading the book Sophie's World. It's a book that it's a fiction book that introduces. I read it in high school, and it introduces you to the different philosophers. And I remember one scene where there's a little girl and her mother, and they are walking down the street, and and something that is supposed to, by the rules of gravity, be on the ground. I don't know, like say cars and flowers and the like, are all floating in the sky. And the little girl turns to her mother and says, "Wow, look, there's a car floating in the sky." And what does the mother do? She faints. The child is filled with wonder, and the mother, who has kind of had the wonder shocked out of her, her reaction to seeing a complete breakage of nature is she faints, right? She's like, "What?" For the child, it's just another cool thing that happens in the world. So the fact that we put the child at the front of things, right, at the Seder, that we're supposed to, we adults need to try to capture that childlike curiosity that maybe has been taken out of us more than we want to admit. And I also think that this relates to one of the other key ideas that we have in the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. So I'm going to share my screen again. Where is my? Huh. Should have. Give me 1 second to find the screen that I needed to share. Okay. Right, take a look. We have one of the other themes that comes out in the Yetziat Mitzrayim story, right? So as early as Perek Dalet of Shmot, what does Hashem say that Moshe is supposed to say to Paro? Ve'amarta el Paro, ko amar Hashem, b'ni bechori Yisrael. Okay, Bnei Yisrael is my firstborn. Va'amar lecha shalachet b'ni ve'yavdeni v'tema'en l'shalcho hine anochi horeget bincha bechorecha. One of the big dramas in the Yetziat Mitzrayim story is that Am Yisrael is supposed to be the firstborn, and Paro gets threatened by God through Moshe that if you do not let my firstborn go, I'm going to kill your firstborn. Now, all due respect, what's going on here, right? This seems almost I don't know, juvenile, right? Tit for tat. I'm going to kill your firstborn if you don't let my firstborn out. What's going on here? And we know that the concept of the firstborn, right, becomes a central theme. It is, right, Makat Bechorot is the pinnacle of all of the Makot, right? Source 17. Vayehi b'chatzi alayla v'Hashem yikat kol bechor be'eretz Mitzrayim mi bechor Paro hayoshev al kiso ad bechor hashvi asher beveit habor v'chol bechor behema. All of the firstborns. God kills all of the firstborns. Why? Why is this so significant? What is the symbolism of killing the firstborn? And you might recall that I told you when we were learning source 2 that we'd be back. Okay, we saw the words that were in bold, but they are in context. What is the context in Perek Yud Gimel? As Hashem is preparing Bnei Yisrael to get out of Mitzrayim, there are a lot of different rituals that, right, mitzvot that we receive, which also have to do with how we're going to treat our Bechor. וידבר השם אל משה לאמור, קדש לי כל בכור פטר כל רחם בבני ישראל באדם ובבהמה ליהו. God is taking the firstborn. Here he is, he's slaying the firstborn of Mitzrayim, and he's taking the firstborn. Okay, and then if you skip to Pasuk Yud Aleph, again, v'haya ki v'yacha Hashem el eretz ha'knani kasher nishba lecha ולאבותיך ונתנה לך, והעברת כל פטר רחם להשם, וכל פטר שגר בהמה אשר יהיה לך הזכרים להשם. This idea of redeeming the firstborn of the first of the womb, the first of the donkey. Like there's this obsession with these. We get mitzvot that relate to how we're going to relate to the firstborn. And again, after we have the hayaki shalcha bincham bachar lemor mazot v'amarta lebechozek yad hotzianu Hashem mimitzrayim mibeit avadim vayehi ki hiksha faro leshalchenu ve'erog Hashem kol bechor be'eretz Mitzrayim bechor adam ad bechor behema al kein ani zovech laHashem kol peter rechem hazcharim v'chol bechor banai efdeh. There were a lot of other miracles that makot that happened, but here we have this focus on the bechor. So I want to share with you what I think is going on. I think what's going on is explained incredibly beautifully by Rav Soloveitchik in the Festival of Freedom. He has a discussion of what did the Bechor represent in Mitzrayim versus what is the Bechor representing in Judaism. The Bechor in Mitzrayim represented tyranny, power, hierarchy. You don't question. Right? The firstborn has this special role. Don't ask me why. You've got to listen to him. And you better not ask a single question. What is the Bechor's role in Judaism? Right? We have all of these rules that relate to Kadesh li kol Bechor. Not that Bechor is not about holding all the power, as Rav Soloveitchik explains. The Bechor is an educational role. The Bechor is, yes, there might be a special role for the firstborn of the family to help give over the values, the educational values of the family, but not from a position of tyranny and authoritarianism and you can't question and you can't ask, but rather from a point of consecration. Yes, there's a sanctity here, and the sanctity is the point of Bechor, not tyranny. And so this was a showdown between the values of Mitzrayim, which were all about not asking questions, not rising up, not saying that that there's something wrong and we need to fix it. And the role of the Bechor in Yiddishkeit, which is educational and is supposed to encourage an active questioning and a way of bringing everybody toward living lives of consecration toward HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I think that is so much symbolized, right? Meaning I started at the beginning and said, it's not even so clear that it's even supposed to be the child who's asking the manishtana. The child just supposed to be noticing, why are we having another kos? But no, it's become the custom not only that the child asks the questions, but that the youngest child asks the questions, right? We have the youngest child is kicking off the entire drama of the whole evening. And what more than that really represents that, yes, that of course we are a religion that has a level of hierarchy, right? And people who have different levels of knowledge and the like, right? Nonetheless, we have the youngest child coming and making sure that we are understanding at the root of all of this is a curiosity that we're supposed to be expressing, right? Whether we are 120 or we are 3, we are supposed to come to this night filled with curiosity and an understanding that a redemptive attitude, right? An attitude which is able to fix the issues in this world is one that by definition is rooted in asking questions and not just keeping things at their status quo, but rather shaking it up. And so we rely on the youngest who are filled with wonder to help us recapture our own wonder on this night of all nights. Questions, thoughts, comments? Questions. You've got to have questions. But a lot of you have been sitting here for 4 hours. So if you don't have questions now and you come up with questions tomorrow, I will forgive you. Echad mi yodea. Yes, mi yodea. That's my mother. Ima, do you want to elaborate on what you mean by echad mi yodea? Meaning that we end by saying we know nothing. We end by saying we do know something. That's how we finish off our Seder. I don't know if she's going to be typing or whether Leora, whether you're able to maybe unmute. Ah, there we go.
Now, I just the culmination of the Seder is our statement of Echad mi Yodea. So we're actually coming to the mi bara ele. We're asking that question, so that the end of the Seder we're coming out with Eino Yodea Lishol. We can't possibly get to a higher level, and that's well.
And yet we have to, and yet that meaning again, and yet we have to try. And yet that's the position. We come with tremendous humility to say, we'll never really know. We
No, but
can't fully know.
Well, the question is how did the Rambam say it? Is it Manishtana as a question, or is Manishtana?
Wow.
Wow. And so I think Echad Miyodeh is a wow.
Wow.
And that's the matovu so it's but Echad Miyodeh, wow. So
that's great.
Well, I want to give us all a blessing that we should all individually and as our families reach this level of wow at our Siddharim this year, that it should open us up and we should be in a constant, we should have all of the ingredients that are necessary in order to have that level of curiosity, which puts us in this question of, wow, mi bara ele. And Bezrat Hashem, through that, we should help all who need to question in order to fix all that needs to be fixed in this world, so that we really can be ready to greet Mashiach this year on Pesach. Bezrat Hashem bimhera b'yameinu.
Amen.
Yeah, very nice. That was beautifully done.
Thank you.
Beautifully done.
Thank you very much, Rabbanit Atara. Thank you everyone for joining. As I had said earlier, the recordings will be sent to you tomorrow. May we only hear Besorot Tovot, wishing everyone a Chag Pesach Kasher V'Sameach. And, oh, we have a question. Okay, do you see it, Atara? You just need to unmute. Oh, hold on, here.
Thank God Leora runs a very tight ship, and that's why we're very professional here. Okay, can't the Rambam's formulation on combining the question of Einenu Yodea Lishol and the timing of when to start the process is just prosaic? When to start opening up the discussion with the uninterested child a month before? The answer is the best time to initiate interest is when all the props are out and all the bells and whistles are available the night of the Seder, exactly when Pesach, Matzah, and Maror will be present. It's interesting because, we have this idea, you're supposed to prepare, right? You're supposed to work a month in order to get ready. But yes, I think, Brenda, you've said it incredibly well, that specifically there might be those amongst us who dafka, they need the wow factor, right? They need to not be thinking about it. And then you have this moment where you wow, you open up their mind. Very nice. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.